Welcome back to another episode of the Works Plus TechTalk Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Van Der Veen, and today I am joined by a special guest that many of you may know. His name is Jim Cuviello. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Jim, you're looking like a podcast seasoned veteran.
Yeah, well, I'm really good at playing the role. It's kind of like fishing. Like I look really good when I leave on the boat because I got all the gear and I got all the clothing and everything. But I don't know. Just because I have it doesn't mean I'm any good at it.
So hang on, are you coming back with any fish?
Most of the time, no. But yeah. For me, it's not really about catching the fish. It's just really being out on the water and being on a boat. I grew up on the water. I love the water. And, it's really the only thing that keeps my sanity, to tell you the truth.
Oh, okay. And so where are you based, Jim? I can pick up an accent.
Yeah. So everybody says that. So out of Maryland, on the Chesapeake Bay. Mm-hmm. And apparently I've got a little bit or some kind of an accent because I hear that often. I mean, just literally going to a couple of states over, I hear people are like, where's that accent from? I'm like, what do you mean? I don't have an accent. No.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, right. I'm all right with it.
Yeah, it's your Maryland accent. Well,
yes,
I've visited your area before, and I can vouch for it. It's really beautiful, and I didn't get to spend long there at all. But certainly one of those places you go, oh wow, I'd love to come back to here. You live in a beautiful part of the world.
You'll have to come back, and we'll go fishing. And I promise we likely won't catch anything, but we'll have a good time.
Well, everyone's heard of Jim, so. It's right. That's on the record. So Jim, you've got a long career in the grinding and polishing industry. You and I met, I would assume, probably in 2008, I think.
Probably, yeah. I mean, the time. Yeah, go ahead.
You were already elbows deep in the industry back then. And we met. I don't recall where we met exactly, but we got some momentum in something.
Yeah, I mean, you were here at one time demonstrating at that time the Husqvarna equipment, mm-hmm. And then we ran into each other a lot at different events, industry events, but. Honestly, I can't remember the last time that we've seen each other face to face. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, I think it was at Cuviello Concrete a number of years ago because I was also there with my brother Ben, and I haven't been to a Cuviello Concrete with Ben in a number of years. And that was I think the last time that we saw each other face to face. But I'm really glad that we get to be on this podcast together. And I want to learn more about where you started. How did you get into this game of grinding and polishing? But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about the business that you're in today. And then I want to go back and talk about where it all started for you.
Yeah. So today, 90% of our business, 95% is polishing. That's what we do is we polish concrete. We get into some concrete slab restoration and repair type work. Every once in a while we'll get into maybe some type of a coating. We do a lot of different concrete treatments, but 90% of what we do is we mechanically polish concrete with diamond abrasives. And that's the way it's always been, and that's still what we do.
I recall you used to do, or potentially still do a lot of schools and that sort of stuff. Is that still part of your customer base?
Yeah, so schools died off for a few years. They're starting to come back again.
Mm-hmm.
So we have done and still do, and the schools are starting to pick up again. We've done museums. We've really done a little bit of anything or any type of industry that you can think of, whether it's warehouses, schools, museums, office buildings, line striping, industrial type work with line striping and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really all based around the equipment that we currently have and own, which are basically some type of equipment that grinds concrete. So if we have the opportunity to use that equipment, it's the type of work we would go after.
Yeah, sure. And how did you get into this game? I mean, it's not an apprenticeship, and there's no one door to door selling it.
No, there is not. So the way I got into it was I was selling janitorial supplies. I had sold janitorial supplies for about 10 years. And I wanted to start my own business again. Previous to that, I had a jet ski rental, Kawasaki dealership. And I had taken on this, got out of that and taken on this other job selling janitorial supplies. And everywhere I went, the floor care that people were receiving, stripping and waxing floors, cleaning carpets, none of it was of good quality. And so I just got to thinking. I started to go to my customers that were unhappy with their current floor care and said, hey, I'll do this at night for you, and I'll make sure it gets done right. And we'll make sure that if we clean a carpet, it won't be crunchy after it dries, that when we strip a floor, there's not going to be, yellow spots, left behind, that we're going to completely strip it. We're going to do it right. And so I would sell janitorial supplies during the day, and then I would go and strip and wax and clean floors during the night. And then I hired a couple of guys, and I wanted to get, at that point, I wanted to get a little bit more specialized. And so I went to a class to learn how to do stone restoration. And while I was in the class, they showed they polished concrete, a little area polished concrete. And as I'm standing there thinking about the lobbies, 500 square foot lobby, 1,000 square foot lobby, somebody's home, I'm looking around this big warehouse and all of this concrete. And as quick as we got into doing stone restoration, we transitioned into polishing concrete.
Yeah, right.
And so at that time, I was trying to figure out if I was going to keep selling janitorial supplies and doing floor care at night. And at the time I went to my wife and I said, hey, I've got an opportunity to take on a partner, and they'll totally fund the business. I can get out of running around all day, and we can just make this a real business. And she's like, do what I want to do. And so I brought on a partner, and we just slowly grew the business from, literally doing. When I started this, architects weren't even specifying this. It was somebody who wanted. It was probably, so the business really got started in September of 2006.
Okay.
And so I really started doing this probably in 2004, maybe. And nobody understood the process. Nobody understood really kind of the benefits of the end product. Definitely nobody understood how you got from point A to Z, right? So at that time, there were some manufacturers out there promoting densifiers. I mean, retroplate, they call it retroplate 99 because of 1999, I think is when they made it the first time. But it was really seeing an opportunity and understanding that I had missed the wave on a lot of other things that had come along in life. And I just saw this as being able to be on the front of the wave. And I jumped on it. I took on a partner, and, we went from doing 1,000 square foot jobs to 50,000 square foot jobs, to 20,000 square foot jobs. And it just slowly grew from there.
Yeah. Okay. And which was the stone course that you went to? Who was running that?
So, at the time, the guy's name was Maurizio Bertoli, and he was this older Italian guy who had, basically done stone restoration his whole life and started a product line. He actually was the first guy to bring Kleenex into the U.S. Gotcha. And I worked with him a little. Yeah, I worked with him a little bit. And then I started going to some of his stone classes and learning from him. And, at the time, there weren't a lot of really good classes teaching people how to polish anything. I feel like now, I mean, that could be, an ignorant statement, but, he was really teaching the technical aspects of polishing stone, which, what I did was I took those technical aspects of polishing stone and I applied them to concrete. And, I feel like that's really the difference between understanding how to polish concrete and not.
Mechanically.
Yeah, mechanically, right?
Yeah.
You know how the industry's gone. I mean, it really, and that was part of the creation of the association, was to kind of try to redirect or try to get the industry to go in a specific path that was about education.
We recently had Josh Jones on. I don't know if you've watched that one yet, but he was also, when you mentioned the association, we're talking about the Concrete Polishing Association of America, which you were the driving force behind that in the early days, setting that up and getting that off the ground. So what was the early intention for the Concrete Polishing Association in your eyes?
Yeah, so a big part of the driving force of that for me was that, I was bidding a lot of work and I wasn't getting a lot of work. And I would go back and I would follow up or go in and visit the places that had the concrete apparently polished.
Oh, yeah.
And I quickly realized why we weren't getting the work. And it was because we were pricing it to polish it like we polish stone. And the product we were putting out had a completely different look. It had a true clarity in its reflection. You could see, it was like high definition. And what people were delivering is they were delivering basically, I don't know, they did something to the floor and they put some type of a light coating down or a guard, and they said, this is polished concrete, right? And, less than a year later, it was worn out. It looked terrible. It looked dirty. It looked dingy. And so this is kind of really how the association and the classes started, because I just decided that our industry had so much more to offer than what was typically being provided, which was a result of being price driven, right? It's kind of like, the quickest path to zero and bidding a job,
Yeah.
So when I started with, I was a force in getting the association started. I was the guy that pushed, right? I was the guy that said, come on, let's get together. Let's do this. Let's basically do classes. Let's create with definitions. It was really Brad Burns. I mean, you remember Brad.
Yeah, I do.
Who unfortunately is completely out of the industry now. But Brad was the one who made the Concrete Polishing Association, which is now Concrete Polish. It's called the Concrete Polishing Council, which is part of the the Society of Concrete Contractors or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know who's involved anymore. But, the idea behind it was to educate first contractors, right? I wanted everybody, and including my competition, I wanted everybody who I was bidding against.
Yeah.
I wanted them to deliver the same work that I was delivering, right? And so the idea was to educate everybody, so everybody was bidding to deliver the same end product.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it was called the Technical Institute for Polished Concrete. Yeah. And we didn't want any manufacturers involved, because we know how associations go when it's manufacturer driven. So we didn't want any of the manufacturers involved. But we quickly realized that why is a contractor going to join an association that really has got nothing behind it? And so at some point we made the decision to bring in manufacturers, and it was actually Greg Schweitz of L&M, who was the first guy to send in the $5,000 check. And once he did that, I think STI, Josh Jones and his father, they were the second one to send in the $5,000 check. And before you know it, we had $50,000 in the bank. And with that money, we were able to do some pretty cool things, putting on classes and spending time to develop what we had hoped to become, whether you call them standards, definitions, whatever they are in the industry. And a lot of that has filtered into the industry and continues.
It absolutely has.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even know what the current Concrete Polishing Council is even doing. I know they're doing some good things. It just got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore.
Well, you had a growing business as well, right?
Yeah, and it needed new blood. And people used to call it the Jim and Brad show, or the Brad and Jim show. So clearly that needed to be, put away. The fact is he and I both, we both got, the fact is we both got pushed out. We started it, but we got pushed out.
How long into it?
That's a good question. I mean, 5-6 years into it.
Okay, so you put some serious time into it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And there were other guys that were involved in starting it. I mean, Derek McKenzie, Craig Walton, Austin Willis. We used to sit around a table and we'd say, well, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? Well, let's do this. Let's do that. Yep. And we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Right. And so as it became more of a real association that had to follow apparently there's rules for associations. There were, committees were formed, and it wasn't 4 guys or it wasn't Brad and I talking on the phone going, okay, let's just do this. It was, okay, put it through the committee. And I think that's really where I started to lose interest, because
that's what killed me.
Right. Just trying to get people to come to a simple consensus. Everybody wants to somehow put their name on it, or somehow say that they were part of this. For me, and I think for Brad, it was really about taking an industry that, basically was a bunch of animals running around like crazy and corralling everything and trying to get some structure to it, which I guess is what the committees ended up doing. But a lot of it was a typical association. A lot of people had their own agendas, and it just turned into
it. I think that's kind of to be expected too, because you think of the industry, what it was at the time, it was a little bit of the Wild West, right? Everyone who was already in the industry had a lot on the line, and they were pioneers in their own right, because
for sure,
as you said, you were out bidding for projects, and then you were telling them, this is what I'll give you. And then you weren't getting them because of price. And then you'd go and have a look at the project and you go, oh, this is not what I had in mind at all when I was bidding.
Right.
And so I think the great thing to come out of the association, if anything, was agreeing on the definition of terms. And in particular for not necessarily just the concrete polishers, but for the architects and the designers to know that there were some differences here, and there's going to be some, definitions that we can understand, and with those definitions come different, pricing structures too. But prior to that, everyone was just doing, I could do polished concrete. I've made my own blend. I've got my own mix, and you'll find out what that is when you engage me.
Right.
And so I guess when a whole bunch of pioneers come together, and now you want to, establish a central portal, the types of people that turn up are people who have worked really hard to build something and got a lot on the line, and they're all very different in their approach. And you've got personalities like your own, where it's very methodical, and we want to we want to protect the industry. And then you've got the other personalities that turn up and, well, we got in just because we saw something in it for ourselves, and we don't care how long it goes for. We're going to ride this wave until it fades out, and then we'll just jump on the next thing.
Right.
Whereas you're trying to protect something for the long term as well, and you bring all those different personalities and agendas together in one place. It's going to be a melting pot of issues for a bit until everything settles down a bit.
Yeah. So do you remember the conference down in Georgia, the International Concrete Polishing, conference or something?
The old Alphabet Show?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So Michael Solwick came to one of the classes that we had put on. And when I was doing classes, they were unmanufacturer related. It was all about teaching what we had to learn on our own, because there was nobody to teach us. And it was wrapped around research that I had done about processing. It was material processing. Taking a substrate, whatever that was, whether it was concrete or metal or whatever, and putting it through a process of an abrasion process, where you started off with a coarse grit and progressively work to a finer grit to end up with a mechanical polish. So it was taking the research that I had done and what I had learned from doing stone restoration, and just teaching the concepts and not trying to sell you anything. And at the time, Michael was really impressed, because most of the trainings were basically manufacturer-based trainings.
Yeah.
So Michael asked me to come down and be the main speaker for the first conference. Little did I know what I was getting into, because I had thought that I had well thought it out. There were about 200 people there, and I was standing up there like I was somebody, telling these people what I thought. And all of a sudden, like, I stopped talking and nobody was talking. The next thing I know, these hands start going up, and everybody, like, it was like, who are you? Like, why do you get to set the definitions? And it was just like one shot after another. And I finally stopped and I was like, hey, I don't care whether I do it, you do it, it's somebody do it, and I don't see anybody doing it. So let's do it as a group. And let's work on this. Let's work on this together. I think we can all agree that right now we're this redheaded stepchild of another industry, and I don't want to be the redheaded stepchild. Let's try to put this together and form it. And everybody's like, yeah, I mean, count me in. And then, 4 weeks later, you call them up and they're like, yeah, I'll do it, but I don't have time for another 6 months. And it's like, okay, I guess we're going to do it how we want to do it. And then it was like, we went to the next conference and we presented what our ideas were. And everybody's like, who are you? Like, why do you get to tell us? And I'm like, we've already been through this once, like, we're here to ask you, we want your feedback, right? If you're that concerned, get involved. Yeah. Okay. And then we'd leave that conference, and 4 weeks later we'd call and say, hey, we need some help on this. Can you sit on this committee? I'm too busy. Okay. And then we go to the next conference and we just do it all over again.
Until less hands came up.
Yeah. But eventually some good people got involved that were as passionate about it as the people in the beginning. And, a lot of smart people. And, I think now, because we've been around for almost 20 years, 18 years.
Yeah.
I think through the evolution of the association or the institute or council or whatever you want to call it, I think we've made some pretty good progress.
I'd have to agree, yeah. I try to imagine how things would look if that never happened.
Yeah, I don't know. What's interesting is, I've got a list of names. Like the original executive board was Brad Burns and Derek McKenzie and Austin Willis and Craig Walton. And then we got contractor board members, Bill Raines, your brother, Ben, Charlie Grafassi, Harry, Grissett, and then there was, the chemical manufacturers, L&M and Greg Schweitz and L&M Schofield and Joe Reardon and ProSoco. And then there was the equipment manufacturers, there was Henrik, HTC Floors, there was you, Husqvarna, Josh Jones Substrate, and then there was, chemical manufacturers. It's actually kind of amazing to look and really see that this whole thing actually even came together, and to some degree continues on.
Yeah, absolutely. It and prior to everyone coming together, nobody really wanted to talk to each other either.
No. Right? Everybody was a competitor.
Yeah.
And everybody had their own, like you had mentioned earlier, their own system, or their own, way of doing it. Right. To me, there was only ever, and still is only ever, one way to do it. And that is to mechanically abrade the concrete progressively through steps until you come up with a true mechanical polish.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the industry needs to continue to go.
I agree. I agree to an extent. If we're talking about producing floors for long life and low maintenance and durability, I agree on that. And I think in the early days, that was one of the things that really frustrated me, is because that was also a vision that I had. There's only one way to do this, and that's properly, and there's only one way to do things properly. But what I've also learned over the years is that the products that I want to produce are not necessarily what the customer wants either. So and to run
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And running a business and being successful in business is not necessarily just being able to bring your product to market, what you want to see out there. It's being able to meet the needs of the customers that you want to work with. And this is also a real benefit of owning the equipment that you have and having the knowledge that you have, because we say, look, I look at your project and there's only one solution for it, and it's a mechanical polished concrete. It's high gloss. It's very durable. It'll last you forever.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, but that's not what we want. What we want is a really low budget, low cost. We're not going to be here for more than 3 years as far as the lease is concerned. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can produce something else that's going to fit the bill for you because of my training, my knowledge, and my understanding. I can build something for you on your floor. And I think one of the really great things to come out of the definitions that was built early on was that we were able to determine these are the metrics to choose from, basically, and this is what you need to be able to hit. And if you do hit these metrics, these are the anticipated outcomes, and this is what you should effectively be receiving for your money.
Right.
And I think that even today still holds true, particularly when there's a dispute.
Right. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. And clearly I've not completely learned it because of my previous statement. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to deliver what the client wants and what they're willing to pay for, right? Which for me, we always delivered because we felt that that was really the right way to go, right? We weren't getting paid for it, but that was the passion. That was the ignorant passion that we had, right? Because we always delivered. We felt like we always delivered the next level above. But a lot of people did very well in life because they understood what you just said, whereas I didn't. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
It's still a hard lesson to live by, particularly when you're a perfectionist, you're passionate, you want to move the industry forward, and all you want to see is the best quality stuff out there everywhere you go.
Right. Well, and that's a challenge because there's a very small percentage of people who want to purchase what I want to put out, So, one of the challenges that we've always had with our crews is that, getting them to be able to transition from, okay, this past job, we were going to do everything to perfection. This next job, they're not paying for it, right? But they just came off of this 3-month job of perfection, and we expect them to turn on a dime, right? So I don't think there's. I give a lot of credit to business owners of a contracting business who have been able to either teach their people or recruit the people who understand that this customer is paying for this one is paying for this, and understanding that there's a difference. Employees are tough.
Yeah.
Personalities are difficult.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And it's in an industry that doesn't have, it's not an apprenticeship. So, and it's very different to most trades and industries in that there are so many different materials and variables along the way that you need to be able to deal with. And you have to have seen them before to be able to identify them and then to be able to tackle them in order to control the outcome. And that's really difficult when effectively you've got a mobile manufacturing plant. And if you've got 25 guys like you had, they're not on the same job. So that's several
Correct.
different jobs, lots of spinning plates, and varying levels of skill on each project. Why on earth did you get in this?
Right. I don't know. I've asked myself that a lot. Like, it's funny. My dad's an electrical engineer. He worked for NASA, and there's always point A and point B, and you always understand how you get, point A to Z. You always understand how you're going to get there, right? Yeah. And to be able to get there, you've got to rely on a lot of different people. And, he looked at me one time and he said, why do you want to be in a business that requires having to rely on so many people to get from point A to point Z, And part of what he was referencing was that he saw at the time a lot of the people that we employed. And, a lot of them worked really hard, but a lot of them, you also had to give overly detailed directions repeatedly of how you were going to get from A to Z. And a lot of them just never could connect the dots. And it's still, employees are one of the toughest parts about being a subcontractor in the commercial construction industry. It's crazy, some of the stuff I've seen. I'm sure you've seen it too.
Yeah. Business is really easy. Like, you put the plan together, the budgets and everything. And when you see it on paper, that's like, hey, that's all that we got to do. That's achievable. And then you add the human element to it, and it's not so much executing the plan, it's executing the plan around all the variables, and all the unplanned events that happen, between that A to Z.
Yeah, I'm envious of people with big businesses with lots of employees where everything just seems to work, because I just never seem to be able to find the right people to put in place. And it's not because I micromanage. Maybe that's the problem, is I don't micromanage a little bit more. I am a firm believer of, this is the goal. And I hired you because I believe you can figure out how to get us there. Right. And I'm not going to micromanage how you do it. It's just, I'm not really good at picking people. I've picked some good ones, but I've picked a lot of terrible ones.
That's, I think that's the case in every business, though.
I guess. I hope so. It would make me feel better.
Well, when it's not all on you, Jim. We had a job interview. You came and you didn't tell me that you'd be a terrible employee.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure you do too, but just the employee stories that I've had or I have. I've had a lot of great employees. I just wish I could like duplicate them. But I think one of the biggest challenges right now is finding good people who want to work, who care, who want to work with a sense of urgency, who aren't looking for a little bit of a free ride somehow, some way. And people who are committed and dedicated to a company. It's just it's hard to find.
Why is that, do you think, Jim? I mean, you're saying that this is now. Is it different to how it was years gone by?
So I think so. I think, COVID really put a damper on it. I mean, I really have had a hard time finding good people after COVID. I have, at least, right? I mean, I can't speak for everybody else around the country. Yeah. But I've just had a hard time finding, people who actually want to work and simply understand that the harder you work, the more efficient you become, the better you treat the company, the more money there will be for you to make. But if you don't work with a sense of urgency, if you don't work like you care, you're not focused on producing a good end product, you don't care about what you're doing, then all you're going to do is just create a scenario that's going to cost more money, either because the project's taken longer, you've got callbacks, you've got this, you've got that, or whatever. I mean, I give you a good example. I've got one guy, Danny. I can put Danny on a job. He is so slow. It drives me nuts. But when the job is done, there's no callbacks.
Yeah.
The job looks spectacular. Everybody's happy. It's great. I've got another guy, which I won't mention his name, which I love dearly. And he's been with me since he was 17 and he's 27 now.
Yeah. Right.
He's loyal, he's dedicated, but it just feels like the jobs, they get done quicker, but we're dealing with a lot more issues that end up costing the company money, So figuring out what job to put individual foremen or people on, I mean, it can be challenging sometimes. I guess going back to why is this something new or is this something that's always been there? I think it's something that's always been there, but I think it's more prevalent now because I think there are less people who want to actually work in a trade, and get out there and get dirty and dusty and, going home tired. I think everybody is a lot of people are looking for a free pass.
Oh man, how is that not attractive? You'll get to start early, you'll get to work hard, you'll get to be covered in dust and slurry, and you'll get to go home tired.
Right, but you know what? It used to be that I didn't. Right, but it used to be that it wasn't a problem to find the people that were willing to do it. I mean, I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, the Hispanic nationality in our country, they are still willing to work hard. I mean, I've got a crew right now. Like I have not had a Hispanic crew in probably 10 years. And I've got this Hispanic crew now that literally, four of them showed up on a job one day looking for work. They were all legal. In less than 3 days, they learned and understood what their individual and collective jobs were. And they just kill it every single day. And our production is going through the roof.
Wow, that's great.
Which is, well, it's a great feeling. I mean, why can't, it's just hard it's just hard to find people that want to put out the effort and who care.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I think the good news in that is that you're not alone. And, at the start of the conversation, we're talking about, I guess, the competitive landscape and how difficult it is, when you're going out to bid and that sort of stuff. And, you can know that those guys who are putting in their bids have got the same types of issues, Man,
I hope so. Yeah.
I hope so.
I feel like I'm singled out a lot of the time, I mean, look, at the end of the day, any business is I shouldn't say any business. I feel like in my business, I'm only as good as the people that I have working for me.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, maybe just every business goes through highs and lows, and maybe we're just been in a low spot for a while, because there was a time when I had fantastic people. We killed it all the time. But for various reasons, those people go away, and you try to replace them, and maybe we're just doing something different. I don't know. Help me figure it out. Give me the answer. Give me the answers.
We'll have to start up the Concrete Polishing Employment Association, Recruitment Association.
Right. Well, and ironically, that's part of going back to the association.
Yeah.
That's part of what one of the goals was to develop people who went through a process of learning that was basically classroom learning, on the hands in a controlled environment learning, in combination with X number of hours being in the field learning.
Yep.
And to develop people who really understood the industry as an apprenticeship, from A to Z. That was one of the goals, and to create a collective pool, which all contractors, subcontractors could pull from. And that's one of the things that with the state of Maryland, maybe once a year, I go to the state of Maryland and I'm like, hey, let's get an apprenticeship program together. What do we need to do? Because if we can create a collective pool of educated people in what we do, then we can all be a lot more successful.
And even the program that you had in the association, you had the different tiers of qualification, which I thought was terrific. I mean, you're talking now about the difficulty of finding people, but at the same time, as an employer, we've got to be able to create some value for the people, particularly when we're working in an industry that doesn't have qualifications. And the association having the different tiers for competency help to build some value for people as well. Like you say, then if there's a pool that the industry can then collectively draw on, then all of a sudden people who are qualified can now you've built value for them too, because you've also got to when you're looking around for a job, you've got electrician, you've got carpenter, and they're apprenticeships. Well, if I'm looking for some stability in my future, they're probably looking pretty good compared to polish concrete over here, but it's not a trade, and there's no qualification, so that's got a little bit less stability in there. But if within the association, there's different tiers of qualification based on skill, and then people will know that you have these quasi qualifications. That's still building some real value.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, honestly, I know a handful of guys that know this business inside and out, and they can pretty much write their own ticket to wherever they want to go and whoever they want to work for. But, I shouldn't even say they're a handful. I mean, it's just a couple of guys. But there is opportunity in this industry if you really, truly understand it and you're willing to take on responsibility. I mean, if you're willing to take on the responsibility of running a job and dealing with a general contractor, I mean, somebody who maybe didn't even graduate high school can make a really good living, doing this. Especially if they're educated.
That's me. Right. I could do this.
Yeah, well, you've done a pretty good job of it.
I haven't even signed up with Cuviello Concrete yet. Imagine what's ahead.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I miss is I've watched some of your videos recently and different educational things that you've put together, and even Josh Jones. Like, I can't tell you the last time I ran a grinder or a polisher or polished a piece of concrete. Tried different products. I mean, I miss it. I mean, it's one of the things I used to love the most. But now I don't know. It just seems like I'm stuck behind this desk with 3 computers in front of me or 3 screens in front of me all the time.
I can relate to that. All I want to do is grind. It's all I want to do is grind. No, so I mean, even like you mentioned, through doing those videos and that sort of stuff, that's actually been very enjoyable because we've been able to do these things. We've been able to grind, and in particular, when we went all the way back to the HTC 800, it was just like, oh man, this is really going back, and then working through the evolution. That was really enjoyable. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm still running the same machines that I was running 10 years ago.
What are they?
Like Prep Master, the STI, their 44-inch machine, and the super abrasive Lavina, the 32-inch.
Yeah.
I mean, the machines that I've got are like the first 32s that they even ever came out with.
Yeah.
I don't know what people do to their machines that they're constantly turning them over. But yeah, I mean, we're still running the machines that we've had forever.
Yeah, but one of the things I also noted when I visited your facility is how well you looked after things too. So that might have something to do with it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. I've got a pile of I've got a corner in the warehouse which is all pieces and parts and machines that have been taken apart and never put back together. So I've got a good bit of that as well.
We've all got a naughty corner, haven't we?
Yeah, for sure.
So is there, speaking of job sites, machinery, staff, all that sort of stuff, is there a particular job site peeve, something you just can't stand, can't tolerate?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them actually. I think, they're completely different, honestly. I mean, one of them has to do with job site production, and the other one has to do with which is a lot of the times general contractor driven, and then I've got my own crew issues, which is pretty much job site cleanliness. I mean, for us to make money, when we bid a job, we always bid it at not getting the maximum production, but not getting the lowest, but somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And if we get maximum production, that's just icing on the cake, right? And if we get below, anything below, mid production, that's kind of like, now we're losing money. And so one of my biggest pet peeves is when we sit down with a general contractor and we lay out how we're going to get through this job, from the first square foot to the 20,000 square foot. And there's a plan. And all of a sudden, the general contractor is piecemealing this stuff to us, 1,000 square feet here, 1,000 square. They just don't understand that for each one of those 1,000 square feet pieces, you are asking us to stop a machine, to switch the diamonds, to change a process of grinding, honing, polishing, densifying. It's hard. I think maybe they understand, but I think that they're trying to juggle all of the trades at the same time. That and they're always honest to get done faster. So if that's the case, let me explain how we can be most efficient. Because every time you change, whether it's just simply changing from one grid to the next, you are stopping production, right? And they're like, well, what's it take? 10 minutes? Okay, well, it's not just 10 minutes, because the second you stop, everybody disappears and goes for a smoke break, or they go to the bathroom, or I don't know, they go check their phone. If they are locked into a process and they're doing a single process over 5,000 square feet, they're focused on getting that done so they can go check their phone, right? Let's not give them an excuse. So that's the first thing, is when production just gets stalled. And the second thing is walking on a job site and seeing our job box a disaster. Walking around the job site and seeing a hand grinder over in this corner, right? or that vacuum that I've been asking where it's been for the last month, I find in a stairwell, right? It's like, or it's like, walking down the corridor and seeing one of our extension cords being used by another trade, right? Because we know where that ends up. It ends up in their job box. Yeah. So job site, the second thing would be job site cleanliness and organization. I'm a big believer that there is money in organization, because when everything's organized, everything just flows.
That's right.
It's efficient. And right. And when it's scattered, everybody's coming to me and saying, we don't know where this went, or we need another one of these or another one of that. And okay, so what are you going to do until I get you that? Well, we don't really have anything to do. And then you walk onto the job and you're like, there it is right there, So it's probably those are the two things.
Yeah, which I think I can relate.
Yeah. So I mean, you guys really aren't. You're not contracting anymore at all, right?
Works Plus doesn't. We still have the sister company ProGrind. They still deliver a whole lot of projects in Australia here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're still dealing with the same stuff.
In some respects, yes. Some respects, no. It doesn't matter whose job site that I go onto. When I see these types of things, it drives me crazy. Whenever I step onto a job site and I see low-hanging fruit, that's what drives me crazy. Just these disciplines that you mentioned. What the true impact is of these types of habits. And so when I go onto any project, I just see, in particular, when we might be having a conversation with a prospective client, and they're saying that the cost is too high, or I'm getting grilled for information to prove that it's worth doing, and then you go onto site and you're like, I can see opportunities for you to improve your bottom line everywhere.
Yeah.
It's similar to the scenario that you mentioned before. It's like the GC says that they want your best price, and then you do that, and then you get to the site, and then they start piecemealing everything to you. It's like this is not going to work for me, and it's not even going to work for you because I'm going to be in your way 10 times longer.
Right.
You guys needed a really good price, and now you're extending the timeline of the delivery of this entire project because you're trying to get everyone to do everything at the same time. We could be successful if we if we all had access and got to each one of us be efficient in this space.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing whether it's the general contractor, whether it's an employee who does not understand the cost implication. Every day you're on a job longer than you should be because you're going to typically end up throwing the same number of people on the job, and just extrapolate out the cost of let's just say 5 or 6 people on a job, right? And let's say they're on that job an extra 2 weeks and they shouldn't be. I mean, the payroll implication in itself, and then the overhead implication because you're not on to the next job. You're still stuck on this job. Let me just real quick. There is a third thing that drives me nuts, and it's when I walk on a job site and I look over and I see our guys doing work in an area that's not part of our scope. And I go to, right. I go to the foreman and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, well, the GC said it shouldn't take us that much time. Like they just asked if they could just get it done really quick. I'm like, that's change order, right? Like we bid per spec, per plans, and if we can incorporate a schedule in there, per schedule, right?
Yeah.
We don't that is how we develop a price. Yeah. So any extra work is a change order, and man, these change orders they can destroy your profit in a job real quick. So that's the third thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's worse than inefficiency. It's just giving money away.
Well, it is, and then again, the general contractor wants to know why you're behind schedule. Well, you've got our guys out there doing a scope of work that's not even part of our scope of work. So now that we're talking about it, it can be kind of fun, but it can really mess with your head.
Yeah. So Jim, is the industry in good shape?
I over the last couple of years have largely ignored everything else going on around me and buried my head into what I've got going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know, honestly, from an industry-wide perspective, if the industry is in good shape. I feel like it is. But I don't know. I mean, that's really, if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I could have told you exactly where I thought the industry was. Yeah. There's a whole new generation that has come into this industry that was not in this industry, when you and I first met. And I mean, it's amazing that they don't even know how the industry got to where it is now. They don't know the names that you and I know. It's just a whole new generation, and it's I don't know. I guess it's interesting. When I started, you couldn't find people that had any experience in we had to train everybody.
True.
At least now there are more opportunities, I think, to find people who have been in the business. Although what I have noticed, at least here in the States, is that a lot of these guys who are good and know that they're good seem to go out and freelance themselves to whoever's willing to pay the highest dollar.
Yeah.
And they're not part of the workforce that we would be able to once hire. I mean, look, when right now, when I bid work, when I first started doing this, you know, the price that I put on somebody for a labor rate is anywhere between $10 and $15 higher than it was when I started, you know, back in 2006.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's not like they're $10 to $15 more efficient or more valuable. It's just, I don't know how we've gotten here. So the cost of doing business is a lot higher. And the guys that know that they know and that they're good, you know, they tend to go out and freelance and demand a high dollar and get it. I guess what I'm saying is that they're not part of the work pool that at one point I felt like we'd be able to pull from. They've just, you know, they've figured out how to freelance.
Exploit it.
Yeah, there you go. That was the word I was looking for. I was going to use a different word, an inappropriate word, but exploiting is probably the better
word. Oh, that's good. Well, yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see where the industry goes then. If there's some of the challenges that we're looking at, because when if you mentioned earlier the really strong competition from a pricing perspective, and we've got rising costs of operating as well. Efficiency becomes everything in that scenario, and you have to be able to create some good value for the client as well. So it's not an easy task for concrete polishers today, is it?
No, I mean, it's not. And, you know, I think one of the things that a lot of concrete polishers, so, I mean, bringing value to a general contractor, I mean, that's one of the things that when we're in negotiations for work and it's between us and somebody else, we try to explain to the general contractor what value we're going to bring that we don't believe anybody else can bring. And, you know, I think if somebody in the industry as an employee or anybody in the industry understands how to polish, if they really want to elevate themselves to the next level, it's learn how to place and finish concrete, to learn the chemistry of concrete, you know, to learn so I've always looked at it as what we do is really a level of material science, right?
Yeah.
Material science is we are taking a bunch of raw ingredients, we're combining them together, we're developing a substrate, right? And then we are then taking that substrate and we are in arguably scientifically manipulating that substrate that we've developed into a finished product, right? And to understand all of it, like the raw ingredients, developing the substrate, and then understanding the technicalities of manipulating that substrate into a finished product through using abrasives and diamond abrasives and chemistry, I think that's where somebody really elevates themselves to the next level.
Yeah.
You know, which again goes back to the original mission of the association, which was to develop people like that. You know, which there's just not a lot of motivated people to get there.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, how do we give that some kind of sexy name so people are attracted to it?
Well, I thought we had done it. There was a technical institute for polished concrete, and they called it TIPSY.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I like that name.
Right. So But apparently it went away and it became the CPAA, and now it's the CPC. So,
well, CPAA, that could have been can't polish anything anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, what are you seeing in the industry? I mean, you guys are kind of, you're kind of a big island all by yourself. And, I know that the States is a unique, what is not industry, but the United States is a unique marketplace. It is unlike Europe. And I'm assuming Europe is a lot like Australia, or you guys are a lot alike that, a lot of what we do here in the States it's looked at as a commodity.
Yeah.
And, a lot of what we do here in the States is very price driven. And we've got a lot of end users who are more focused on price than end product. And when they don't get the end product, they want to know why they didn't get it when they demanded the best price,
Yeah.
So, I mean, is like in Australia, are you guys constantly competing on price?
No, most people here they have bucket loads of cash, and they want to pay the most for whatever they can get. I think it's.
I'm getting on a plane. I'm on my
way. It's well, as soon as you get off the plane, you'll be greeted with wads of cash to spend while you're here.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's. I think we've got. It's the same everywhere that you go, I believe. Price is always going to be important, but price is always going to be more important when value is not understood. And
right.
I think the challenges that we have between both countries is particularly the way that I believe that polished concrete was born in the US versus how it was born in Australia. And I mean, my understanding is that in the US, polished concrete was mostly born in large quantities for warehousing, distribution centers and manufacturing, replacing epoxy coatings and other types of coatings, just building durable surfaces that were maintainable. Whereas in Australia, it was actually built as a much more niche product, which was seen as being affordable by only those who were building multi-million-dollar homes at the time. And so we had in Australia what was a very expensive product, which then more products were born out of that trickled down into the market, down to the lower ends. Whereas in the United States, polished concrete was seen as a cost-effective way to manage a facility's durability, so surface durability, and to try and push up from there is quite difficult, I think.
Right.
And not only that, but if you're training the workforce to install that type of finish, and then you do get a project where they want exposed aggregate, integrally colored concrete with decorative aggregates in there and everything as well, and now you need a team of craftsmen to finish that project. Where do you get them from when you've just been training them to do all of these bulk square feet? Whereas in Australia, it was kind of the other way around. They learned how to do all of the architectural stuff first, and then they learned how to do the bulk meters.
Right.
So I think there's challenges in each market, because in Australia, when I guess they started to see some of the demand in those broad span warehousing, distribution centers, and manufacturing, those companies that were globally owned would call on a contractor over in Australia and say, for our local Australian distribution centre or manufacturing facility, we want polished concrete installed here. What's the price? And they'd say, oh, it's X. And they were like, huh? No. That's not what we pay, because everywhere else in the world, we're paying a fraction of that. And Australian contractors were similar to you. They want everything to be perfect. So they were like, yeah, we don't polish concrete for that kind of money. And we don't do work that bad as you've requested by specification. We want to change that to something that's, beautiful and glossy and, it's going to impress people for a lifetime. So that took a very long time for the Australian industry to respond with a much more cost-effective solution. But there's still a disconnect in that even the Australian-owned entities still expect higher quality finishes, despite the fact that they're getting a price indication from another office on the other side of the world, where the delivery expectation is so different. So, there's challenges in Australia in that sense as well, that the markets don't marry up at all. Jim, thank you so much for coming and spending time with us and for sharing all your background. It's been really good. I've enjoyed it. And like we said earlier, we don't even know when the last time what was that we got to speak face to face. Not quite there, but pretty close. I'm really grateful for the opportunity and your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Good conversation.
This show is proudly supported by Works Plus. Works Plus brings total solutions to all concrete grinding and polishing contractors to make it totally work for their daily operations. We hope you've enjoyed this show. Make sure to tune in each week, where we're going to dive deep into all things related to concrete grinding and polishing. We're here to help you so that you can boost your outcomes on the floor.